Episode 182. What the hell is soil carbon? This is the World Organic News for the week ending 19th of August 2019. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. This week I'm going to address the question that is in this episode's title. This was triggered by a conversation I overheard on the question and it left me speechless. The level of misunderstanding was something I felt needed to be addressed because soil carbon is so important to the process of reversing CO2 in the atmosphere. So if we are to do this, we really should have a thorough knowledge of what's involved. So, from the New South Wales Department of Primary Industry, we have a fact sheet entitled Key Soil Carbon Messages. Link, of course, is in the show notes. Quote, soil organic carbon is a vital component of productive agriculture, but there are many myths and misconceptions about it. End quote. So let's get to it. There are 9 things listed in the fact sheet, but there are just 5 I think that we need to understand and understand deeply. I'll just run through those. 1. Soil is a significant carbon sink. 2. Increasing soil organic matter can improve productivity by improving soil structure, increasing nutrient cycling, and encouraging diversity of soil organisms. 3. Farm productivity is closely linked to soil functions that depend on decomposition of organic matter. 4. To increase the amount of carbon stored in soil, carbon-based inputs need to be greater than the losses. If the balance isn't right, then the amount of carbon in soil is depleted. And 5. Many soils have the potential to store large masses of carbon. Starting with number 1. Soil is a significant carbon sink. The carbon cycle has been part of the biosphere since the first arrival of life on the planet. The thing I've noticed with natural systems is this. The more complex the system is, the more stable it becomes. It is because the carbon cycle has been around for so long that its complexity has, to some extent, protected us from the practices we have been following. Much carbon can and was stored in soils in the world. We can return to this state, but we need to do it in a way that actually works. This turns out to be relatively straightforward. Once we move our mindset away from artificial fertilizers, which are feeding plants, to organic matter, which is feeding the soil. Number 2. Increasing soil organic matter can improve productivity by improving soil structure, increasing nutrient cycling and encouraging diversity of soil organisms. By increasing and maintaining soil carbon, we actually create better, more productive soils, and this is old knowledge. The point of most farming systems prior to World War II was to conserve and increase the amount of soil carbon. In those days it was just called organic matter, but basically it's soil carbon. It was also known as humus or humic acid. The humus is fed by the detritus of production, from the results of growing crops, of feeding plant material through animals, and by producing compost. I would refer you to a book available online for free called 10 Acres Enough. Link in the show notes. The author is fanatical about collecting organic matter. He sends his farmhand out to collect fallen leaves in autumn from roadsides. He bought in-calf cows prior to winter, housed them and collected their droppings in huge piles of manure and compost, and then the cows with calves at foot were sold in spring, with a huge amount of manure available for the growing season. He does have some strange ideas about bare soil attracting rain, but we can allow some leeway for a book written in the 1870s. Number 3. Farm productivity is closely linked to soil functions that depend on decomposition of organic matter. This is a key point. The decomposition of organic matter feeds the microbes that create the humus. By doing this in an organic way, we continually feed the soil. The microbes in the soil then feed the plants. There are a couple of ways of doing this. Cover crops and green manures are plant-based ways, but putting organic matter through animals speeds the process up no end. These 2 systems are basically the difference between John Jeevons and the Grow Bio-Intensive method and John Seymour's animal-based production system. Either way, you end up with organic matter for the soil to incorporate into itself. Now, both Jeevons and Seymour are soil turners, but the easiest way to get material into the soil is to pile it on top. The natural systems look after the rest. If we go the chemical route, then year on year more chemicals are needed as each application burns through humus. Once the humus is gone, growing is more like hydroponics in dirt, rather than letting the soil do the growing for us. Simples, really. Number 4. To increase the amount of carbon stored in soil, carbon-based inputs need to be greater than the losses. If the balance isn't right, then the amount of carbon in the soil is depleted. Now this is almost self-evident. The systems employed must put back more than they take. Masanaba Fukuoka developed such a system. Link to his book The One Straw Revolution is in the notes. And his system comes down to some principles. What are pretty basic. 1, no digging. 2, no weeding. 3, no artificial fertiliser. And 4, no pesticides or herbicides. I'd add a 5th one there, use open pollinated seeds. But he was doing that as a matter of course, saving his seed from year to year, so I guess he didn't think it needed to be put in. Now all those things are simple. They may not necessarily be easy to get our heads around, but they are essentially easy to implement. It just takes creative thinking. No, really it does. That's all it is. And number 5, this is our favourite one. Many soils have the potential to store a large mass of carbon, and this cannot be overstated. In colonised countries, native soils held much more organic matter than they do now. After all, indigenous peoples didn't have access to chemical fertilisers and managed to survive quite happily for centuries before Europeans arrived. In the case of Australia, 60 millennia at least. So there's a huge hole in the carbon cycle that we can fill quickly. As I've mentioned elsewhere, the site Journey to Forever has a great compost page, link in the show notes. I have a favourite quote from that particular page. Quote, "It's estimated that a human with a compost fork and a watering can, carefully piling up organic matter with the correct carbon-nitrogen ratio, water content and aeration, so that it cooks away at high temperatures and emits jets of steam, can make as much topsoil in a year as nature can make in a century." End quote. I'll just say that last bit again. A human can make as much topsoil in a year as nature can make in a century. And this is how we suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and recreate soils producing food fit for human consumption. We can do this. We must do this. Probably yesterday, but today will be good enough. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Of course, if you'd like to join the movement to recarbonise the soil, or you know someone who would like to join the movement, our online conference, RegenEarth 2019, Living Soils, Backyard Regen, would be a great place to start. With over 300 years of accumulated and knowledge and experiences from our presenters over the 3 nights, covering everything from compost to seed saving to no-dig gardens, all for the low price of just 67 Australian dollars. Please come and join us. There are links in the show notes. We'd love to see you there in September from the 16th to the 19th. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.